Hi, I'm Selena, and today I'm going to be reviewing the first book in the Witcher saga, or should I say the first short story collection in the Witcher saga, which you read before you read the rest of the series. There's 2 short story collections. This is the first of 2, called The Last Wish. The Last Wish follows Geralt, who is a witcher, and what that means is he basically hunts monsters. He is hired to hunt monsters in local areas by local people. He's paid to kill these monsters, and the short stories basically follow him navigating this profession. You basically see different jobs that he takes from different people, and among that you get to see his personal life and you get to see how he is treated by the locals that he works for. Also, I should mention that to be a witcher, you are magically enhanced, I believe, that's what I gathered from it, in order to hunt these monsters. You have a different stamina levels and strength levels than the normal human. And so Geralt is not entirely human himself, even though he is hunting largely non-humans. That's his job description. And so that allows for a really interesting exploration of humanity and outsiders and insiders, and what it means to be human, I guess, and what it means to be a monster. And this also brings up the question, what does it mean to be a non-human killing other non-humans? So I personally gave this 4 stars because most of the short stories in this collection, there were 6 of them, I gave 4 stars. I think there were 2 that I gave 4.5 stars. So this review is basically going to be broken down into 4 parts: genre and structure, plot, character, and then kind of miscellaneous things. And included in miscellaneous will be a little bit of my thoughts on the world building and the themes. This review will be non-spoiler until the end, when I will have a short spoiler section for any of the Witcher fans who want to hear my detailed thoughts on certain scenes. So let's kick this review off with my thoughts on the genre and the structure. This is a fairy tale fantasy. That is the term that I have seen floating around, mainly from Daniel Green. I'll link him below. He talks about the series a lot. So to me, what fairy tale fantasy means is fantasy that is heavily inspired by and models itself after fairy tales. And that is definitely what this short story collection is. It takes a lot from fairy tales. I will say though, the Last Wish and the Witcher saga as a whole, I've heard, takes these fairy tale roots and go somewhere different with them. And that is exactly what I saw with The Last Wish. You see it and you think you know it and you think you know the story, and then Sapkowski takes it into a completely different direction. And that is honestly one of the biggest strengths of this book, I think, because Sapkowski really made these elements of fairy tales and folk tales his own with this story. In other words, it mirrors fairy tale tropes and then it completely subverts them. I should also mention that Sapkowski is Polish, and so a lot of the lore he uses comes from Poland, from what I've heard. And I will say that some of the tales he used to inspire The Last Wish I recognize. They were reminiscent of other tales, such as Beauty and the Beast or the Minotaur or something else, but I'm sure that there is also a Polish root that for a lot of these things that I didn't know about. If anyone does know about that and want to talk about it in the comments, that would be totally fine and totally cool. Let's continue talking about this, because I know very little about Polish traditional sort of folklore. So that's the genre of this book. That's what you can expect from that. Now to talk about the structure. The structure, as I mentioned before, is a collection of short stories, and they're all surrounded by these kind of interludes from what I presume is the present. I've heard that the short stories themselves, they're not ordered in the chronological way they take place. There were a couple times when I could tell from the tells that Sapkowski would put in here that this story happened before this one, or this story had to happen after this one because Geralt has this certain item or whatever. But for the most part, I couldn't tell where these stories were supposed to take place. I'm sure that a Witcher fan could tell me and help me with that. It didn't super impede my enjoyment of it because each story stands on its own so well, it doesn't really need to be connected to the others. I assume that all these stories connect to the Witcher saga in some capacity and they will come back up. So I'm hoping that the later parts of the series will make things a bit clearer, such as chronologically wise. Moving on from genre and structure, we move on to plot. As I mentioned, each story has their own plot. They are not really connected in the sense that they tie together. The connecting thread that goes through them is that they are all missions that Geralt has been hired to do, and the experiences he has in those missions. With each plot that you encounter with these short stories, they take fairy tale tropes and fairy tale plots and cliches, and then they completely subvert them, and Sapkowski takes it into a completely different direction than you're expecting, and that made each story really fun to read. I also think that Sapkowski is a really good short story writer. They wrapped up nicely. The pacing never really felt off. It felt like we were where we were at the right times, I guess, and things were progressing nicely. One con, though, is I did find the short stories a bit info-dumpy in the dialogue. We would suddenly be spoon-fed all of this information about why Geralt is here or what is he supposed to be doing. And some of it wouldn't even be like completely true, and then he would give you more info dumps as you get more information. And so that was just one thing that I found hard to pay attention to. I listened to this on audiobook, so that was a little bit hard. Moving on to characters. The only character that we see in all the stories is Geralt, but you can already see in this short story collection the forming of a cast, which I'm assuming will come back in the next short story collection and in the main series. But focusing on Geralt for this review, because he is the character we spend the most time with, we don't get a lot of interiority from Geralt. We don't hear his thoughts a lot. It's the book, these short stories really feel like someone is telling you a tale about Geralt, and you only hear what Geralt is thinking when he speaks. I didn't mind that at all. I felt that this short story collection had a much more subtle character work than I've seen before, and I really enjoyed it. I still felt like I knew Geralt. It was done so well that I felt like I knew him, even though I wasn't getting much from his mind, if that makes any sense. Geralt in himself is also a subversion of a character trope. He is kind of the Aragorn, like, strong guy type trope, and he is completely subverted because you do see doubt and weakness at times, or maybe not necessarily weakness, but flaws. He is definitely not perfect, and he's definitely not as noble as characters of this archetype typically are. Geralt is not a Witcher because of the pure nobility of his heart. He does have a hope that the world can be better, yes. He is also getting paid. This is his job. And he does have regrets. He does make mistakes. He doesn't do everything right all the time. And that is what made Geralt such a good character and such a fun character to follow, because he wasn't typical. Also, the prejudice and misconceptions that Geralt faces are really interesting and add a lot to his character and his character arc in general. I think that it was especially cool because of his archetype as generally the ideal man or the ideal person. And Geralt, although he is a part of this archetype, is not trusted by a lot of people implicitly. He faces a lot of prejudice, and that was really interesting to see. On to themes and more general things very quickly. The themes in this are largely explorations of morality, and also we do deal with, as I mentioned, prejudice against Geralt. And there's also other characters who you meet in the book who face a similar prejudice, and it's about the responses that people who face this prejudice take, and what is the right response. Is there a right response? And do you owe the world something when the world has so much misunderstanding and hatred for you? On to general things that I liked and didn't like. I really, really enjoyed this world. I really enjoyed the themes. I loved the creatures of this world. I loved the world building that it took to build them up. You get the feeling that this world is vast, but Sapkowski doesn't spend a lot of time just info-dumping world building. That is all worked into the narrative. It's plot things that he info-dumps more, I thought. Some of the cons, though, that I struggled with, there were some narrative problems that I found. There were times when I was a little bit lost because it felt like things changed quickly without enough warning at times. It could have been the audiobook, or it could have been lost in the translation. Sometimes translations do make stories more choppy than they seem in the native language. And so I'm sure that a lot of this has to do with the way that I consume the text, and another person might not have the same problems. Those are just the problems I ran into. Also, one thing that impeded my enjoyment a little bit was that Sapkowski implies a lot towards the end of his short stories, or he implies the endings and the meanings you're supposed to get from them almost, and it wasn't enough for me at times. The narrative didn't always flow for me, and so I'm sure that if it had flowed, I would have gotten that conclusion that Sapkowski wanted me to get from it, but I was confused about several things in the end of these short stories. If you've had a similar experience, please let me know down in the comments. It didn't really impede my enjoyment of the story, but I do think I didn't get as much as I could have from it if I had followed the story better. Okay, so that was my spoiler-free review of The Last Wish, and I'm going to move into spoilers now. So if you have read this book, keep watching. If you haven't read this book, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you another time. I will see you another time. If you read this and want to come see my thoughts, come back to this video. But for now, let's get into spoilers. Okay, so the story with the Sylvan, I don't remember what it's called, but the devil, or like the little goat man, he was my favorite thing, and that story just shocked me so much. I was so intrigued by it from the start. I was just so interested in that plot, and it honestly reminded me a little bit of The Ocean at the End of the Lane, and so I think that's why that story ended up being my favorite, because of the Neil Gaiman vibes I was getting from it. And then it completely went into a different direction. I was not expecting the elves. I was not expecting Lila to be who she was. I was just shook about that story. I loved it. I struggled with some stuff, and I want to know if like any major Witcher fans can like answer these in the comments. Just do like a spoiler space thing. And if it's something I'll find out in later books, like just tell me. If it's something I'm supposed to be confused about, just tell me that too. I mean, because I'm just a little bit confused. I'm not sure what Geralt's like the last wish was. I got the idea it was to bind him to Yennefer, but I'm not completely sure. I probably sound so stupid. I promise I read this book. Like, I promise it. It's just that I had a hard time following it at times, so I have some confusion. Okay, and with that princess, the princess in the story with, like, it was like the third story or something, where she's gonna marry this guy because she was betrothed to him, and he's a beast during the day and a man during the night. That one, and how Geralt, you find out that Geralt was kind of born under this, I don't remember what it was. It was like a contract or something, and she was also born under that contract, I assume. And his like request of her to be husband was to it wasn't ever explicit, but I got that it was for him to come back for her 6 years later and train her to be a Witcher. Is that the right conclusion I was supposed to come to? Because like, I do trust authors when they want me to come to these conclusions. It's just that with this one, I wasn't completely sure about the flow of these stories, and so that detail, I was like, I think that's what it is, but I'm not positive. So if any Witcher fans want to confirm or deny that, that would be amazing. Also, like, just like if you want Witcher fans, like, let me know whether these stories come back up later, or like whether they're what the order is supposed to be. I don't know. Will I find that out? I don't know. I just am curious about what the major fans think of this and how they contextualize them within the rest of the series. Also, Witcher fans, if you guys know about the show, what books it follows, I've heard Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, but if you have other information, and it turns out I should read the whole series before watching the Netflix show, or I should read like Blood of Elves to get the most out of it, then like, let me know, because I want to watch the show because one of my friends watched it and really loves it, and I want to talk to him about it. So if you can tell me what I need to read in order to do that and not be spoiled and like have read it first, then I would love to know. And thank you ahead of time. So that was my review of The Last Wish. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this helped you decide whether it was the book for you or not. And I hope that some of you saw your experiences with this book reflected in mine, and I hope that some of the Witcher fans can help shed some light on the things I was talking about down in the comments, or any Polish fans, if you want to tell me more about Witcher's place in Poland, then I would be totally open to that too. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye!